Good morning.
Good morning, Randy.
This is the Accessibility and Disability Policy webinar series, and we have with us today Rose Aird-Minette from the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services under the Health and Human Services Commission. She will be doing her session kind of in two parts, so we might take a little break to change PowerPoints, give you guys a breather. But this beginning of the session is understanding hearing loss and the barriers to employment. So I'm going to turn it over to Rose.
Thanks, Randy. And I'm not really going to belabor anything else about myself, except that I've been at the state office for deaf and hard of hearing services since 1995. I'll let you do that math.
That's a long time. All right. And the goals of the session today.
The goals of the session today. Yes. Let me put my glasses on. That will help me.
Okay.
So for part one, I really just want to talk about how communication can break down so that we can talk more about how we can make communication more successful. And even though my slide title was in employment, my examples are broad, and this can be applied to your personal lives, to your family members, or if you are hard of hearing yourself. I am hard of hearing, so my examples are specifically about people that are hard of hearing, not deaf ASL users. And so we're going to talk about these three broad categories of communication.
Okay.
Here's a big myth that hearing aids fix the problem. And it's a pretty pervasive myth. I have people all the time that when I say, excuse me, I'm really struggling to understand you, they say, well, just turn your hearing aid up. Don't you have your hearing aid on? Well, as we throughout this next 30 minutes of this part of the presentation, we'll come to find that hearing aids are a great first step, and they do give us volume. However, the problem is they amplify everything in the room. There's lots of other issues with them, so we're going to discuss that. So I'm hoping that this video will work.
It's coming up.
Great.
I hope you can hear it.
Okay, I'm going to be referring back to examples of that throughout the next hour and a half. But so in those three broad categories, talking about communication, the first big one is environment. And for people that are hard of hearing, there are so many factors in the environment that can impact whether we can understand or not. And I think it leads to some confusion, and family members and coworkers might say, well, you were just hearing me a minute ago. What, are you just not trying anymore? Or why are you having a hard time now when you said you had your hearing aid on, you were doing fine, you know, talking to the boss a few minutes ago. So it's very confusing for people. So first big thing in environment could be lighting. And this was daytime, but with a window with the blinds open behind this coworker of mine. I don't know if any of you know who Randy Turner is, but there she was before she got her hair cut. And you guys stole her away from me. She used to be my coworker at the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services. But anyway, this is daytime, so just be mindful of where the lighting is if you're talking to somebody with a hearing loss. Think about how it is when you're walking out of a movie theater and the light's so bright outside and you're squinting and it's hard to see. And so people that are hard of hearing really rely on facial cues and looking at your mouth and lips for lip reading and such, and looking at your face to fill in some of our gaps. So bright light behind us is not good. Light on our face would be great. Another big thing about the environment is the distance. And so this, I really like this simple chart because it talks about distance from the speaker. So across the horizontal bar on the bottom, you see 6 feet. So when these were people with perfectly typical hearing, this is not a class or a group of people with a hearing loss, these are folks with typical hearing. And when they are only 6 feet away from the speaker and given like a speech recognition test where they could understand words, they got about 90% of those words correct when they were only 6 feet away from the teacher. But moved to just 12 feet away, that next bar over to the right, and look at how comprehension drops or speech understanding drops dramatically. And these again are people that do not have hearing loss. I have to point out though that because that big drop is so dramatic, because these are probably just single words. So there's no context, you know, like a spelling test or just a list. This is what an audiologist would do if they're testing your speech understanding, if they would just give you random words. So people with typical hearing just moving to 12 feet away from the sound source already are missing 50% of the words. So I'd like you to think about that. If you're thinking about somebody sitting in the front of a classroom or the front of, you know, a board hearing or whatever, they may be 12 feet away from the sound source, even though they're in the front row. So our speech comprehension is really going to depend on other things because we're only catching occasional words, we're filling in gaps, and we're trying to think, okay, what's the topic here? Now, when we know the topic, it gets a little bit easier to guess those words. Okay? We're talking about budgeting. I say cash. And you might think, if it's just a single word list, you might think, did she say cat or cats or cash? Oh, we're talking about budgeting, therefore she must have said cash. So that's how all of our brains work. And that's why that 50% seems like a big drop for you. But that for hard of hearing people, imagine our struggles if people with typical hearing already have that much of a different difficulty at a distance, okay? A big one for hard of hearing people, the size and the acoustics of the room. I took this picture of an actual hotel I was in, which had 3 floors up. It was a wide open lobby. And so you could see, you know, all over the place. Oh, it's beautiful, but it's very difficult for a hard of hearing person sitting down there in that lobby. You had a water fountain there, and you have a lot of hard surfaces, which create a poor room environment. So room acoustics are how easily the sound can get to my ears. So when you have a lot of hard surfaces and high ceilings and glass, things like that, the sound actually bounces off and almost creates like a mini echo effect to us. So it makes it more difficult for a clear speech signal to get to my ear or to my hearing aid. So even though they're very beautiful tile floors and marble and high ceilings and glass, they're very difficult for a person with hearing loss. So I attended a conference in this hotel, and you know, a lot of people with typical hearing, 5 o'clock comes and they all want to gather with their old friends and colleagues they haven't seen in a long time, and let's go sit in the restaurant out in the lobby here, let's go sit in the bar out in the lobby. This is absolutely the worst place. I would never want to sit here. Not only are the room size and the acoustics are poor because of all the hard, fancy surfaces, but then you have noise coming from the water fountain. So this is kind of thing, my brain is very tired, my ears are very tired, my eyes are very tired by the end of a 5 o'clock conference because I've been trying so hard to pay attention and learn and take in new information. The last thing I want to do is sit out here with a group in a noisy environment. So you might think of one of your colleagues as a party pooper who might just be hard of hearing and they're just absolutely exhausted by 5 o'clock on a Friday when everybody else is going to go to that Baby Acapulco's Mexican restaurant for a happy hour. It's like a very difficult place acoustically. A lot of times, for some reason, Mexican restaurants have like the hard floors, the tile, and big wide open. A lot of restaurants are big and wide open and large rooms, and the just the glass and all that, and it's just a very difficult environment for us. Okay. And really, probably the biggest thing, if I could summarize hearing loss and our difficulties and what we need to be aware of when you're communicating with a hard of hearing person, is that background noise really affects our understanding. The video you saw of the hard of hearing gentleman at the cocktail party, he was standing there smiling when the waitress came over and tried to offer him hors d'oeuvres. I know he just had no idea what she was saying. He was just trying to smile and, you know, be nice and friendly, figure out what she wanted, and then, oh, she's offering me hors d'oeuvres. He didn't know what she was saying to him. Or at the very end of the video, when he's standing in that group. Okay, so you're in noise, which is very challenging, and then you have a group where people are taking turns back and forth, and you're trying to follow. Okay, who's talking? By the time I figure out who's talking and I turn to them, they're finished, and then someone else is adding on to that fun story or that joke or whatever, a discussion. And so groups in noise are really challenging for us. So his coping strategy, he has no strategies, that dude. So his coping strategy is to stand around and smile. Okay, and he smiles in the cocktail party, and he thinks anything anybody asks him, he's just going to smile and say yes and nod his head and see what he looked like when his coworkers say, "What do you think, Tom?" And that happens to us a lot. We think we're covering, like, for a short-term coping management when we don't really have any strategies, when we haven't taken these kinds of seminars, and we're just out there and we're losing our hearing as adults, and we really don't. Maybe we bought a hearing aid, but that's all we tried to do to help ourselves. A lot of people do the whole bluffing and smiling and nodding and don't really understand what's going on, but don't speak up and let us know about that either. So what are his coworkers thinking about him right now? You know, we have to think about that as a hard of hearing person. We think we're getting away with it, but people are snickering behind us about something that we missed or we answered wrong, okay? So
can I add something, Rose? When you were talking about, you know, being in hard surfaces where there's a restaurant or something like that, but also I think of a lot of people talking at the same time, that happens in meetings. You know, you're in a meeting, it could be a board meeting, it could be a staff meeting, and it could be even a small meeting, 5 or 6 people, then all of a sudden 3 people are trying to get a word in. And as a person that's hard of hearing, you don't know which one's talking. You're spending all your time trying to figure out who is saying what, and it can be very, very challenging.
Thank you for adding that, because that's exactly what's happening in this picture here that I selected, because even a little bit of side chatter is really, really difficult for us. So for one thing, you're causing a background noise, which is actually our #1 enemy. Okay, put a hearing aid on me, it's amplifying my background noise. All right, so we've got that #1 enemy going on, and then we're trying to concentrate, we're trying to do our work, we're trying to listen to the boss, you know, we have to take notes, we're all stressed out because we're missing things. And you're thinking a little side conversation is not a big deal for most people, but when you have a hearing loss, every little background noise causes us to miss what's being said. And think about that slide where we talked about distance from a sound source and how our comprehension really drops the farther away we get. Think about that, adding a little bit of background noise even throws us off and makes us work so much harder. We need the volume of the presenter to be even louder now because there's some kind of noise near us. All of those add to a lot of stress too. So thank you for bringing that up, Randy. I appreciate that. Okay, so I've already talked about emphasized poor background noise is a big challenge for us. Some of the other things in our environment that are barriers to our successful communication. We touched on poor room acoustics, and I hope you will remember that hard surfaces, high ceilings, large rooms, and lots of glass are all our enemies, okay? So we know a lot of people are designing their offices and their schools and their homes to be big, wide open floor plans with high ceilings and fancy, beautiful, but it's really difficult for us. So I have a house that I bought with a high ceiling, so I asked, we have to put carpeting in it. I cannot have any kind of hard surfaces in the living room just to help me absorb some of that sound and make it so that I can hear a little bit better in my own living room. So we talked about distance from the speaker, and that bar graph really makes an impact even on people with typical hearing. A lot of times there's a microphone and a podium somewhere in a meeting and people go, oh, I don't need that. I can speak loudly. Well, I need you to use it, please. And if this happens to me, I advocate for myself a lot. I ask for what I need. I say, please make sure if I'm going to go to that town hall meeting that there's a mic in the room for the questions. And even when we have a person designated to run the mic around to you, to just say, hold on that 1 second, a mic is coming to you, please wait for it. People go, oh, I don't need it, but I need it. So try to be a little more sensitive to that in the future. I think people are very scared of a microphone for some reason. I mean, opposite of me, you know, Randy and I, we don't mind being front and center, but some people feel like they're really, I guess, on stage when they have a mic in their face. But please be aware that it's really helping other people in your environment. Appreciate it. I appreciate that. Poor lighting. We showed you a photo of bright light from behind the person that you're speaking with. So if we can get light on to people's faces or neutral light, overhead light is fine, but this bright light when we're having to look. So when the Office for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services has a meeting somewhere, the first thing we do when we go into a room is we close all the blinds. So we just do that. It's also visually distracting to see people walking around the hall or the lawnmower guy outside or whatever. So it reduces some of the visual distractions because, again, we're not just working really hard with our ears, we're working really hard with our eyes. So I appreciate that. You guys can help with that in the future. Be a little bit more mindful of it. And then I don't know how many times I go to, you know, presentations where there's no handouts or people copy the whole page of policy and they put it up on a PowerPoint and you can't read any of it because it looks like it's about 3-point font by the time you put a whole policy page up on a PowerPoint. So if you're going to use visual aids, make sure they're really visual. Make the font big, make the, you know, a lot of pictures on the page or whatever, make it simple. And if you know you have someone that's hard of hearing, that's a coworker, to print out an agenda or print out notes afterward, to do things in writing, summarize the meeting, things like that will help a lot because we are really working hard at something like a meeting when there's groups going back and forth. Some more little reminders that even though these things seem minor to people with typical hearing, they can really throw us off. Sometimes when I go to a meeting in a new building and I'm not sure what the setup's going to be, just the AC and heating running cause me, it's just too much background noise. Causes me to miss what's being said. So I really have to make sure I locate myself right next to the person who's speaking. AC and heating, noises outside of the building, you know, outside the window, people just that little side conversation in you know, office settings, the copier running and the phones and all those things. I know a lot of you probably sit in cubicles if you're working folks, and it's hard for even people that have perfectly typical hearing, but for hard of hearing, those cubicles mean that all kinds of background noise is getting into our environment, and then we struggle with using the telephone and using our hearing aid with the telephone, and it's just a lot to deal with. So I might situate myself perfectly in a meeting. I get to the meeting early. I know who's gonna be the presenter. I sit right next to them. I do everything I can to make sure I can follow the meeting, and then the person next to me coughs while the boss is saying the budget or something, and I become deaf for that minute. Just coughing in my environment, people pouring a pitcher of water with ice and water, you know, that's sitting in the middle of the table. Those little things that you don't think about, they will cause me to miss what is being said, and others, your coworkers, will be missing. And at home, is the dishwasher running? Is the refrigerator, the hum, is there fans going? Am I standing next to running water? Do I have the sink water running? Because if I have the sink water running, my husband is being trained not to talk to me when I have the sink water running. You have another example? Randy lives with a hard of hearing person.
Well, I can give you an example of miscommunication. It's my favorite story. We were It was the last year my daughter played in the orchestra. She played for 4 years, all through middle school. In her freshman year, she decided to quit after the end of that year. So it was the last concert. And so we were in the Round Rock Performing Arts Center, which is a big, hard surfaced facility. So you've got hard walls. There was carpet, but you know, there's high ceilings, and there's people get up after it's over, and the chairs pop up, and people are talking, and so the noise level increases. And I was standing in front of my husband. He was behind me, and I know better. I know I should be looking at him.
You couldn't see your face. Okay.
Right. And so we were walking out with the other people, and I said, our baby's growing up. And he kind of like stopped and kind of did his arms out in his face, and he was like, where? And I'm like, I've learned to not repeat myself. I'll ask, what did you think I said?
Yeah.
And he said, I thought you said a baby's throwing up. And we laugh, and we still laugh about it. But it's so easy when you've got all that noise, like the chairs popping up, the people talking, so volume, the noise level increases, the acoustics were not great. I should have turned around to say, and I'm learning. I'm still learning. And he wears hearing aids now. He didn't, I think he did at the time too. He didn't for a few years because they broke, but they're not cheap.
But if he had them on in that orchestra
it probably would have been just as bad, because I wasn't looking at it.
Yeah,
if I was looking at him, it would have been different.
Yeah, and so thank you. Those are some of the strategies we're going to talk about in part 2. I appreciate that. And it takes a lot of time and patience. If you're, if you've grown up with good hearing, and then later in life, maybe you lose your hearing slowly over time, and you've already been in a relationship for a while. I mean, you're starting all over with new strategies. And
I think it takes patience for the person that can hear too, because I know this stuff. I've done this stuff for 30 years, and I still get impatient when he misunderstands something I've said the second or third time, even if I've rephrased it. And that's my problem. I know better, and I just have to be, and I'm learning. I feel like I'm still learning. I mean, I'm a lot better than I was 5 years ago. So it's a process for everybody, not just the person who's hard of hearing.
Well, yes, I'm hoping some of the people on this webinar don't have a hearing loss, but they have a family member or work with somebody with hearing loss. So we realize it puts a strain on the whole relationship, and that's why we have a part 2 to talk about some strategies.
Great strategies.
But first, I want you to be aware of all the things that are causing us a difficulty. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about environment. And now we're going to talk about some of the things about a person that's speaking that might make it more difficult for us to understand. So if they have a full beard, a big bushy mustache, we're not able to see their mouth, and we are relying on it. Whether we tell you that we're lip reading or not, we are trying to figure out what you're saying. If they're from another country and they have a thick accent, if they have maybe really rapid speech, or they're more of, I guess we call a mumbler, where I say it's poor articulation, but just not separating their words very well. But I have to say something about mumbling is a lot of people who are losing their hearing slowly or in denial about their hearing loss say, you're mumbling, I'm not hard of hearing. So I'll be careful about saying mumbling. Just a kind of, some of these things we're not going to be able to control, whether a person speaks too fast or whether they speak too softly, or the person, like I think about medical settings a lot where they call my name and I didn't know they're calling my name, or we're walking down a hallway and the nurse is trying to tell me all these things about what's going to happen, when we get to the waiting room, blah, 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 and she's in front of me because I don't know what room we're going to. And I'm behind her. And just like Randy was just saying, anytime you're behind a person that's talking, we have no facial cues. And even for all I know, the nurse might be talking to a coworker while she's walking by and answering one of their questions or something else. But if it's anything important to me, I'm missing it. So these are difficulties. And then the bottom section of this page talks about any time we cannot see your face, it makes it more difficult. So if you have somebody that has a hearing loss, if you can present, if you're in their line of sight and they can see your face first before you even start talking, you will save yourself that having to repeat again and again and again. If it's dark, if you're in a movie theater and you're trying to whisper to each other, you know, if somebody's, you know, talking in a meeting and they're resting their elbow and they're talking, covering their mouth like this, or they have something in their mouth, or
I'm sorry, Rose, I'm missing,
Oh.
not on the right slide, I don't know. What slide
characteristics,
number?
you were
12?
on speaker characteristics.
Okay, I'm
That's
sorry,
okay.
I'm
There you
sorry.
go.
There we go,
Okay.
thank you.
Sure. So anytime we cannot see you well, or like if it's a PA system and they're announcing something, so some people have a real challenge at their workplace because they'll call you over a sound system and say, we need cleanup on aisle 8, you know, and then you're in a noisy grocery store or something like that. It's very difficult to understand a sound system. Or if the speaker's wearing a surgical mask, for example, that ever happens to you, very difficult for me. Although they now have see-through masks. They finally,
That's right.
And a doctor from Austin, my friend, developed them. So I'm very proud of her. Are we getting any questions?
No questions yet. So please submit your questions as we go through the session.
In the questions box.
Yes, in the Q&A box.
Okay. So those are some of the things about the speaker. Unfortunately, like if this is a college professor or your boss or whatever, it's going to be really difficult to control some of these things.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, if this is your spouse and you're hard of hearing, if it's your child and you're hard of hearing, you can kind of teach them. I'm not understanding you till you're in front of me and I see that you're talking to me. Could you slow down just a little bit and separate your words a little more, and those kinds of things to give them feedback. But boy, some of this stuff is just difficult. Some of these things are like part of someone's job duties. Have to work with a mask on, or have to work in the dark, or with the PA system. So it creates some difficulties that a hearing aid alone won't fix. Here's some things about the person that's hard of hearing that can create more barriers, or things we just need to be aware of about the person that's hard of hearing. So, you know, do they have a severe hearing loss? Is it high frequency? Is it progressive, where it's getting worse and worse as time goes on? Did they just recently lose their hearing? That's going to be even more of a challenge than someone who's had a hearing loss for a while. I'm hoping a person who's had a hearing loss for a while has at least thought out some strategies and looked at purchasing a hearing aid perhaps and things like that. But on the third bullet, hearing aids don't always help everyone. I mean, it makes things louder, not necessarily clearer. There's a lot of speech sounds that are very similar, and that's in another slide. So just the loudness level, bringing us into the normal listening range so that we can hear somebody saying something, doesn't necessarily mean that our brain has processed it and understood what you said. So hearing and understanding are very different things, okay? If you get somebody, teachers do this all the time, the hard of hearing kid has been identified and they're sitting in the front row and they have their hearing aid on. First thing in the morning, 8 a.m., the teacher says, Johnny, can you hear me? And Johnny nods, yes, teacher, I hear you. And then for the rest of the day, the teacher doesn't check in at all. She just thinks, well, Johnny's got his hearing aid on, he's sitting in the front row, and he said he can hear me. Now, you're teaching him new information in a noisy classroom. There's a distance factor and the room acoustics and all that, or he's not always understanding you. But yet, Johnny has to have some strategy because it's going to be very difficult in a classroom to give a teacher that feedback all day long.
And in the workplace, the same thing. Somebody could be going through orientation. They might be going through a new training for a new responsibilities of their job, or how to use a special piece of equipment. So the same thing can happen at the workplace.
Definitely. Thank you. Some people have taken classes on communication strategies. Most have not, I find. So I keep my communication tips very general and basic a lot of times, because we've got people who don't even realize, oh, I need to look at somebody, you know. And just let me finish the slide, almost done with the slide. So I like to be able to do this kind of webinar to help people learn a little bit of knowledge and help their family members and coworkers understand them a little better. And knowledge of that there are other devices out there besides hearing aids and cochlear implants. Most people's knowledge stops there. They don't ask their audiologist about anything else, special alarm clocks, special doorbells, smoke alerts, and all those things, which are available for hard of hearing people and deaf people, but hard of hearing people are not aware of it. It's not like advertised on TV to the general public at all. And so we may have very limited knowledge of devices availability and that we have any rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I mean, most people with a hearing loss are in denial or not even aware that they're hard of hearing, so they would never consider themselves as a person with a disability. And then finally, you know, is this person like outgoing and assertive and will speak up for themselves and willing to advocate for themselves and say, hey, I really would prefer next time we have a staff meeting if we could all do this. Can we close the blind? Can we sit in a circle? Can we have one person talk at a time? It will really help me as a person with a hearing loss. Most people that I know that are hard of hearing don't really speak like that. Does your husband?
No, not really. He might at work because he's
Yeah.
really comfortable there with the employees, but in
Yeah.
other settings, like if he goes to a training or something,
Yeah.
he may not speak up in settings like that.
And I see he's the kind of person that goes and sits in the corner at a party, I noticed.
Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah,
So
he's like that anyway.
he's not gonna so okay, so those are just some things about the listener. So there's a lot of variables there. I just wanted you to have some awareness.
We do have a question,
Okay.
and you may get to this later in the session, but the question or the comment is, I'm hoping you'll talk about more solutions to group discussions in the work setting other than sitting near the speaker or passing around an item to indicate who is speaking at the moment. Some of that has already been addressed, but any other tips are appreciated. And I figure that's your part two.
Part two.
Okay, we'll
Part
get there.
two.
We have about 20 slides in each
Yeah.
half. So give us just a moment and we will
I'm
get
sorry
to that.
if you feel like I'm throwing all the problems at us, because I am. I just want everyone to be aware first. And this, I'm not going to do anything techie about this. I just want you to be aware that there's a lot of parts to hearing. These are all parts to hearing. But then when the sound travels through this entire mechanism, and then the very final stages, it says it gets to the nerve. And that nerve goes on up to the brain, and it is not till the sound signal or the speech signal gets all the way up to the brain and we thought, did he say cash or did he say cat? Oh, because we're talking about this topic, he must have said, you know. So we have to do all that sound processing also. So listening, I hear you speaking, go through all these mechanisms, and many things can break down with these mechanisms. But the most common thing that we have happen to us as hard of hearing people is called a sensory neural hearing loss. And that's where damage is usually in that purple cochlea, which is a snail shell shape there. And this is what I'm going to show you on the next slide. I just want you to understand the hearing loss a little better. So this is people with perfectly good typical hearing have all these tiny little nerve endings called hair cells that individually move within the cochlea, and they send the speech signal or the sound signal across each section on up to the brain, much like blades of grass when the wind is blowing or something like that. They're all moving, and they're moving that sound signal along the way inside that cochlea. Okay, this is what typical hearing looks like. When you get damage, with people with sensory neural hearing loss have, is either missing hair cells, like in that front row there. There's not even any hair cells anymore to even pick up a sound signal, or the damaged ones you see in that second and third row in the middle and on the left. Those, the sounds still have to travel through that cochlea in order to get up the nerve and all the way up to the brain where we think, what did she say? However, the sound is traveling through a distorted, damaged system. So even when a person with a sensory neural hearing loss puts a hearing aid on, the sound is traveling through a damaged system. So we say, yes, teacher, we hear you, or yes, boss, I hear you. It doesn't necessarily mean a clear signal that's understandable gets up to our brain and we actually understood it. So I wanted you to understand that. Put a hearing aid on and it's amplifying, it's pushing more signal through, but it still has to travel through this cochlea, through these damaged hair cells before it travels up to the brain. So that's where you may see a hard of hearing person when you ask them a question, they look at you like,
Squint their eyes, eyebrows narrow.
They're really thinking. There's
eyebrows narrow.
No, maybe they heard you. They're trying to figure out if they understood you, and it takes us a few beats. So I don't want you to confuse that with people that are slow mentally or anything like that, because it takes us a lot of extra work. We are processing it.
It doesn't get fixed. Once these hair cells are damaged, you're done.
Hearing aid
You
on
lost that part of your hearing forever.
That's right. That's hearing aid on does not fix this. Okay, next slide. We're almost done. All right, so here's some other things about the listener. So most common is damage in those hair cells that respond to high frequencies. These are examples of, in English, the speech sounds that are high frequency, which you see there's a lot of letters there. There's a lot of speech sounds. The problem is, this is the most common kind of hearing loss. A lot of people get high frequency hearing loss before they get low frequency hearing loss. There are lots of letters and sounds in the English language that have high frequency sound, and they are difficult or impossible to say any louder. So when we're saying what to people and people are yelling something louder, so when you yell, did you say cat, the animal with 4 legs, or cats, plural, if you say, what did you say? And the person yells cats louder, you can't really say, you cannot really say an S sound any louder. And so it's very difficult. So the person that has typical hearing is saying things louder, and all we're hearing is the vowel in the middle. We heard the ah, we heard the, we heard the o, we heard the goo, but we don't hear what's on the end. And sometimes we don't hear what's on the beginning because they're high frequency consonants, which usually is at the beginning and end of all of our words. So, when you shout, you're emphasizing the low booming sounds that have more power, like vowel, ooh, ah, e, and or distorting sounds. Also, when you shout, you're distorting your face when you're shouting or saying, I don't need a microphone, I can just, yell my question. So we're not able to lip read you as easily. It's because your mouth movements are not normal. You're distorting the speech signal, and then you start to look angry, right? Well, you don't have to yell at me. We say, oh, you don't have to yell at me. Well, you didn't hear me the first 3 times, So it causes some frustration and aggravation.
And you mentioned lip reading.
Yes.
Not everybody can lip read.
Oh, and it's not an exact science. Many, many speech sounds are actually invisible in the back of the throat. So you're not going to be able to lip read that anyway. Okay, here's some examples of high frequency hearing loss. If your boss says you can't, take off Friday. Did you hear? You heard you can take off Friday. There's only a little. I don't know, can Cart hear that?
I don't know how Cart.
Can Cart hear that? Because it's very difficult to hear. You can't say it any louder. And your boss is not going to stand there and articulate clearly for you. It'd be nice that this was in an email to your boss. If you are hard of hearing and you're trying to have this conversation, you want to make sure, okay, you get back to your office and you type to him. I just asked you if I could have Friday off, and I understood you said yes. So just here's my, just to clarify and repeat. A nice thing would be if your boss said cannot. But most of us use contraction. And so, unfortunately in English, a lot of contraction, that little on the end, or the, what's another one? The would, the wouldn't, the did, the didn't, they're all on my next slide, actually. Here's just one more about boss says do not spend more than $15,000 on the bid. You smile, you nod, you go, good, I heard you, boss, and you walk off. And you thought he said don't spend more than $50,000 on the bid. That's something I would definitely clarify in writing.
And you might talk about this later, but get with somebody you work with and have them, I don't know if you're going to have a list of things that sound the same, that look the same on your lips, but 15 and 50 is one of those. They look exactly the same on your lips. Yeah. So if you, and she's going to talk about techniques to clarify that, but can you send me a list of some examples that they can go back and use in the office to show?
So like lip reading practice, or they look the same on the lip
Yeah,
practice?
and I'll share that
Sure.
in a follow-up email with this material.
You remind me to send
I'll
it
do
to you.
that. I'll do that.
She's putting that on me, I put it back on her.
That's fine.
So just to think about, these are just a couple little examples, but lots of misunderstandings can happen all day long. And these are some examples of things. Again, the contractions are very difficult. That last sentence is a story that I have about a repairman that came to my house one time. And it was my lunch hour, and it was a new apartment I just moved into, and there was like 4 or 5 little things that were wrong with it. And I called the landlord, and he sent this guy over. It was a new person. I didn't know him. He's not my friend. He's not my colleague. And he came over, and Ken came over, and I showed him, I said, here, we need to take care of these things. And he started working on stuff. Well, I was home for an hour, and so I ate, and I was washing the dishes in the sink or something. I was running the water in the sink. So, okay, and Ken is only a few feet away from me, but he's behind me where I cannot see him, and he's on his knees, and he's looking down at the floor. Okay, not really good visuals for a hard of hearing person, but he's thinking he's so close, he's just going to, ask me something, and I had the water running. So he said, can I interrupt you for a minute? So I turned off the water, and I was like, sure, Ken. Now remember, I have my hearing aids on, okay? Sure, Ken, you can interrupt me for a minute. And so I followed him down the hall, and I thought he was going to ask me some more details about one of the repairs. And he walked down the hall, and so I followed him, and then he went into the restroom, and I started to go into the restroom after him, and he turned and he closed the restroom door in my face. And I was like, oh, I guess he didn't need to talk to me, but I thought he said, can I interrupt you for a minute? And I mean, the fact that I almost walked in the bathroom with a strange man that I didn't know, I don't always disclose my hearing loss to every Joe I meet on the street. But in that situation, I thought, when he comes out, I got to tell him, hey, funny story. I don't know what you said, but I have to disclose this to you because I'm hard of hearing. I didn't want him to think I don't know what an appropriate political term would be, but anyway, there's other things that could have been going on in his mind. So Ken comes out of the bathroom, and I said, funny thing, I thought you said, can I interrupt you for a minute? And he said, no, can I use your restroom for a minute? And so, the same syllables, I didn't get clarification. I thought I heard him. He thought I heard him. Blah, blah, blah. So this happens to us all day long. And sometimes it's not quite that embarrassing, but again, remember my video where the guy thinks his boss is resigning, or the coworker in the noise is saying, what do you think? We all day long go through this. So you might think we're listening and we're hearing and we're understanding, but we're just, we have our hearing aid on and we're going through this kind of misunderstanding all day long. So remember Ken, and can I use the restroom for a minute? Get clarification. So I have 2 more slides in this part about our challenges, and then we'll take a short break and switch. Since a lot of you are employees and you have workplace situations come up, group discussions, again, I want to remind you, are a challenge. We'll talk about some more solutions in the next part, but why are they a challenge for us? We have our hearing aid on. We sit where we think we need to sit. We get there early. We maybe, if we're, taking this kind of webinar, we close the blinds and we try to close the door so there's no background noise and everything. Fix the chairs so we can see each other better. But there's conversations going back and forth, overlapping, and by the time I figure out, with my poor ears, it's hard to localize, which means we don't know where sound is coming from, okay? If you have 2 equal ears and they both hear well, whichever side is louder, that's where you turn. But if you only have 1 ear like I do, everything's coming in on my left side, so I never know where the sound source is. So we're trying to figure out where the sound is, who's talking. By the time I figure out it's Joe over here and I look at him, he's done, and it bounced back to Mary. So think about that for us, please. Distance from the speaker, remember the graph, so the farther away we get from the person that's speaking. So if I get there and I sit next to the boss, because I know he's the most important person to hear, and now everybody else is talking and maybe Mary is 20 feet away from me or 12 feet away from me or whatever, it's going to be more challenging for me. A lot of times, like I pointed out, if there's a microphone there, people go, oh, I don't need it. And that's very frustrating for us. Unfortunately, many of my hard of hearing colleagues are more more shy about their hearing loss, more self-conscious about their hearing loss, and won't speak up once a meeting has started. They may approach and say something to HR or to their colleagues about, I'm really having a hard time in staffing. They're not going to say anything once things are rolling in front of everybody. Seating sometimes cannot be moved. If seating can be moved, we talk about later, but if seating can be moved, let's make it a semicircle or a circle where everyone can see each other's face, or at least a rectangle where everyone can see each other's face. But when you've got long lines of people on both sides and people are leaning forward in their chairs during the meeting doing this, if I'm sitting on the right of this guy trying to see who's speaking on the left of this guy, he's blocking my view of that person talking. So it's nice that we can just see everybody if you have a small enough group that you can do that. Remember the room acoustics, please. If you're going to have a meeting, carpet is nice. The small, like what they call the acoustic tiles, those white lowered suspended tiles that have all the little holes poked in them. Those are acoustic tiles and they actually absorb sound. And then difficult to ask for repeats because things are going back and forth rapidly, and because my hearing loss is invisible, people forget. So there's just lots of reasons why group discussions are challenging for us.
Victoria has a question.
Okay.
Also, does it matter if the presenter and listener are on the same height level? Is it harder if someone is sitting and the other one is standing?
Well, it helps, you know, again, the closer you are. Well, the thing about speech is it doesn't go in a straight line from my mouth straight to somebody's ears. It goes into cube space. So basically, the farther away, no matter if you're up or down, just the distance, it doesn't go straight to somebody's ears anyway. It's going in cube space and it loses power quickly. So anytime it's closer is better. So yeah, I mean, I always try, if I know somebody's hard of hearing, get on their level anyway. I feel like it's easier to read their lips and they can hear better. Their ear is right near my mouth and things like that. So I suggest if you know somebody's hard of hearing, get on their level, whatever that is. And then this is a reason, I hope I answered that.
I think so.
This is my final slide in challenges part of the presentation, but the reason why, like first day or going to a new training in a new building or first day of class or going to a new board meeting in a new building and you've never been there before, there's a lot of challenges with that for us. I'm not sure whether just my hearing aids alone will be okay in that setting because there's a lot of things that are unpredictable, like who's going to be the speaker? Am I going to be able to understand this person, or do they have a heavy accent, or will there be a lot of group discussion or just one person? And, you know, what's the acoustics and the lighting like? You know, how do I keep up with discussion? Is there going to be a video shown? Is it going to be captioned? You know, so all of those kinds of things present us with new challenges, and I'm never sure whether I should ask for a cart or ask for an FM listening system or just rely on my hearing aid. So we are just going to take, unless there's another question about any of that.
No questions. Was that the last slide?
A short break and switch over my PowerPoint. So stretch, get your drink. 1 minute, we'll be back again.
All right, give us just a moment.
Thanks, Randy, for doing that for me. I knew everyone would get frustrated. You're telling us all the problems. You're not telling us the solutions.
We'll get to solutions. We're ready as soon as you are.
Oh, that was fast. Hang on a second. You're faster than me. I just told them to take a break, so.
Well, they can take a minute.
Yeah. Okay, we're obviously going to slide 2 on this one.
Okay, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, we're up and running.
All right, so we have till 11:30, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please do.
We have a question right off the bat, so let me do that because I'm not sure which part it connects to. If you're not if you're not sure in a new situation whether to rely on a hearing aid, ask for card or use a listening device. Do you request one? or of the latter, just in case?
So I try to go see a room first if I can. I don't know if you can always do that. I try to see the room first to find out what the agenda is, who's speaking, and all those kinds of things. And then you're really going to have to, the person just needs to know themselves and their own needs. Sometimes it's better if you know the entity is willing to provide CART, or has an FM system, or you have an I always suggest more is better than less. I mean, you don't want to get somewhere and then just be lost the entire time, because you're not going to be able to request anything once you get there. So,
Gotcha.
yeah. So I have a few goals for this next 35 minutes to discuss some strategies, and please give me questions on your situation so we can give better examples. Talk a little bit about the room and the environment modification, very little bit about assistive technology and some resources at the end. I'm not going to go in depth to a lot of technology. I'm mostly going to give you technology for like meetings and going to trainings and group settings. We're planning another assistive technology workshop for later on to go into just all kinds of other devices. So here's some things. If you're hard of hearing, we need to remind hard of hearing people that it's frustrating for the other people also, their spouses, their coworkers, their family members. These are things that the other people say about living or being with people with hearing loss. And in this PowerPoint, I take a lot from Dr. Sam Triken. I've noted him on the bottom there. He is a hard of hearing person, and he is a psychologist, and he gives a lot of couples and family training. He has heard from couples and family members for, I don't know, 40 years now. He's a highly respected professional, and he's got some good stuff on his website. So these are things that the hearing person says about the hard of hearing. And I think I've emphasized this enough. Hearing aids are a great start. They are expensive. Hopefully people can afford them, or they have health insurance, or go to vocational rehabilitation in the Texas Workforce Commission to see about getting some help, especially if it's needed for work, or for training for work, or for college training for work.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that if you're losing your hearing and you've already got a job, that they can help you. But Texas Workforce Commission Vocational Rehabilitation Services can assist you to help you keep that job. And if you have to hear to do your job, they can provide hearing aids. In some cases, they have provided even cochlear implants. So,
and assistive devices.
And assistive devices that you're going to talk about here in just a moment.
Yeah.
So don't forget vocational rehab. I'll make sure and include that contact information in the follow-up email.
I have a summary sheet for VR if you would like that. Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Here we go. Let's go.
Yeah, next slide. And I've already emphasized this. Hearing aids are great, but they amplify everything. So if we're in noise, they're amplifying noise. Also, think about, if you go somewhere and somebody's using a microphone and they start to talk and they forget that to hold that mic up near their mouth, and the mic starts trailing off and they're using it as a pointer, and they're, doing all kinds of things, and it's getting 3 feet away from their mouth. Well, it's more difficult to hear, right? Because their sound, the speech, is farther away from the mic. We have a mic on our hearing aid. It's picking up sound. It's the same thing. The closer to the mic, the sound source, the better off we will be to hear you. So, and again, remember the slide about the cochlear implant with people with the nerve hearing loss, which most of us have sensory neural hearing loss. We have a damaged system, and this amplified sound has to travel through that. It may give us some little bit of distortion sometimes and not clarity. So this, I'm speaking to the person with the hearing loss now. I want you to read these 2 examples of a person that's hard of hearing and their attitude. Maybe I need to read these out loud.
You might.
Okay, this is attitudes make a difference. Compare these 2. Rats, I misunderstood and screwed up in that meeting again. I really can't do this work. Compare that to somebody who says, Wow, that was embarrassing. I really need to set up the FM system in the meeting room in the future so I can follow what's being said. So it's a I'm giving up attitude. I'm just no good. I can't do this anymore. I'm embarrassed and frustrated. To this person has researched devices that might help them in a group setting, and they're going to be proactive next time. They're going to ask for them, or they're going to set up their own FM system so that they can hear. And I have a picture of some FM systems later on in the slide that you've never seen before. So here are some ideas about repairing communication breakdown. I want to see first from the audience, make it a little interactive if we can handle it, Randy. If your boss says something like, don't spend more than $15,000, and you heard don't spend more than $50,000, what are some strategies you use now to avoid these kinds of misunderstandings? Do we have anybody that's using any strategies that they want to type?
Right, if you're using some strategies, type it into the question and answer box. We'd like to hear what yours are.
Yeah, and then it kind of gives me a baseline too.
Nothing yet.
Okay, well, yeah, I have a little lag, but I'm a little concerned that most of us just think we heard it and we just walk off without verifying or doing anything else. Let's just go. Nobody has anything?
One person says, I repeat how I understood it.
Good for them. And so what's happened to me sometimes with like money is I'll say, like if it's in a restaurant or somewhere, I'll say, did you say, you know, that the bill is $63.95? And they say, yes. Well, I find out later that they could not hear me either. So it's better with money to do something in writing, I think. Well, maybe the boss is hard of hearing too. You never know. Any other strategies? Okay.
Nothing else.
All right. So here's some communication tips. Now, this is for people that are hard of hearing. I'm talking to you people from one gal to another, okay, peer to peer. Get close before you start speaking. So you know you have difficulty hearing from 10 feet or 20 feet away, right? I cannot tell you how many times, and it's so easy for us to do this. If I'm upstairs or down the hall and I see somebody coming that I want to ask a question to, I say, hey, Mary, what did you guys talk about at the staff meeting? I can see Mary and I can speak to her from 10 or 20 feet away. Well, Mary starts answering when she's 10 or 20 feet away. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. You know, I should not have done that because I need you to be closer to me. So let us model to our coworkers and our family members before we start yelling across the room and then we don't hear the answer. Let us get close to them first and say, I need to get close to you before I ask you this question.
My husband does that. He asked me a question from another room and I know he will not hear my answer. So he needs to not ask the question from another room. So we are working on that.
Work on that. Tell him that Dr. Triken says whoever initiates the conversation needs to go to the other person.
Also, we did have, as you started, we had some other strategies.
Oh, strategies? Yeah.
One, Maureen says, us Yankees need to remember to slow down when we speak. So that's hard for everybody sometimes.
Yes.
Carolyn says, I always say, did you say don't go over 5 or 50?
Lovely.
And then Catherine says, repeat using each digit and follow up in an email. That's a great idea.
I love that. So you said, did you say 15 or did you say 50? I think that's perfect. It gives them something to work with, and then instead of them just parroting and saying the same thing over and over again. Because again, you know, like I said, with can and can't, the boss might say, I said can't, and we don't even hear the T. Especially if he starts to raise his voice. If he says, I said can't, the T really disappears.
So how do you fix it?
So I would say to the boss, did you say I cannot? Did you say I cannot take Friday off? And or you know, you can verify with in writing and email him later on. But especially with a boss, with money, with important things. But it's the same thing for you set a date with your friend that you're going to meet at, you know, Threadgill's restaurant on North Lamar on Friday night at 8 p.m. and the other person who's hard of hearing just nods, great, can't wait to see you, and they get the time wrong or the Threadgill's location wrong because we have two, you know, the date, the time, all of those things. So why not repeat back what you heard? If you are hard of hearing, it would really help your spouse or your coworker to say, I think you said Friday night, 8 o'clock, Threadgill's on North Lamar, right? Great.
Yes.
So repeat back the important stuff. I don't even have that on the slide yet, but I'm just tell others what you need. Identify yourself as hard of hearing, which is hard for some people, but you might say if you're in a noisy place, because I'm hard of hearing, Randy, would you mind talking to me about that topic down the hall? Because that's really important to me. So let the other person know that it's important what they're saying. You want to make sure you get every detail right. They're important and we're really wanting to pay attention to them. So because I'm hard of hearing and this is a really noisy place, would you mind stepping outside and having that conversation with me? Most people will stand there in noise and just suffer and nod and maybe get it right, but maybe get it wrong. So let the other person know why. Why do I go to a party and ask the host to turn down the music? Maybe somebody thinks I'm a real party pooper, but I say because I'm hard of hearing, that makes it even harder for me to understand all my friends around this table. You know, so tell people you're hard of hearing. And you know, a lot of times if you're in noise and you say, because I'm hard of hearing, I'm having a difficult time hearing you here, let's do something else. People go, I'm having a hard time too. And you would be surprised how many times people say, I cannot hear in the airport either. You know, I cannot understand this restaurant. Let's get out of here before we talk about this topic. Questions? Oh,
No.
okay. Use technology. Do you know I went to a presentation one time and the people in the room were all visually impaired and hearing impaired, deafblind. So they had some degree of hearing loss, some degree of vision loss. And I brought my own sound system. I always bring my own sound system, but when I'm giving a presentation, I have a portable mic and a portable speaker. And so if you are a trainer or if you're going somewhere and you're having a meeting, you can bring your own. And I have two microphones. So I have one pass around for audience questions. I have a lavalier for me, and then everybody can hear in the room. So anyway, I brought this. Now, these people who are deafblind had their meeting in a cafeteria, which is like absolutely worst acoustic environment in the world, with the large room, the hard floor surfaces, windows all on one wall, high ceiling. It's just horrible. Even if you were sitting right on top of each other, it's not a good acoustic environment. So this lady was hard of hearing and she was blind and hard of hearing. She raises her hand and she's complimented me. Thank you for bringing the sound system to this meeting. They never use, and she points to the whole room of all of her colleagues, you know. They never provide a microphone for any of our other meetings, and it's so hard for me because I'm hard of hearing. And I said, oh, well, I'm glad you appreciated the sound system, and do you wear hearing aids? And she said, I don't like my hearing aid. I leave it home in the drawer. And that is why I have this bullet on here. You cannot expect everybody else to go the extra mile to make sure they're speaking up and getting close to you and using a microphone, and you're not even using the technology that's at your, you know, avail. So if you don't like your hearing aid, I start asking questions. Why don't you wear your hearing aid? Oh, well, they amplify background noise. Don't you think it might help you in meetings? You know, if it's uncomfortable, go back to your audiologist. You don't like the way it sounds. You don't like the ear mold, go back. But we need to do at least 50% of the effort. We should be doing a lot more than 50%. Here's some more tips if you're hard of hearing. Do your best to reduce background noise. If you can, ask the host to turn down the music, or like I'll go to a meeting in someone's office and they're just listening to music on their radio all day long. You know, that's probably their way of cutting out all the other cubicle noises. But I say, would you mind turning off your radio while I'm here in your office with you? It's a simple little thing, but it'll help me hear you a lot better. As a hard of hearing person, again, let's get in the habit of repeating back important parts. I think you said we're meeting tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. at the 4900 office, right? And so just repeat that back, and that gives the other person an opportunity to correct you if you heard something wrong. Okay, but not just this nodding and smiling and we walk off thinking we heard things. When it's important, like work or money or a date or your children's emergency room visits, we need to repeat back what we think we heard on the phone or in person. Do we have time for your story, I wonder?
No, we've only got 20 minutes left,
Okay.
so I think we should
All
just
right.
move on.
Again, modeling good behaviors for the hard of hearing person means don't yell from the other room. If you have a hearing loss, you need to go to the other person and see their face before you start talking.
And if you know your coworker has a hearing loss, you need to go to them to ask a question and not do it from the hallway or from the doorway. But make sure they're looking at your face.
Otherwise, you are going to have to say it again anyway, or they're going to misunderstand you. So if it's important, it's worth the communication. Go to the person that's hard of hearing. Hard of hearing person, if they're starting a conversation, they need to model good behavior. Also, give feedback. Thank you for slowing down. This is just the right pace for me. I can really follow you in this noisy place, Randy. I appreciate that volume level. I appreciate that pacing. It's just right. Thank you. Give people feedback when they're doing something right. Most people don't think about the way they're talking at all. So if you're asking them to change something, make sure you're telling them their compliments and smiling and say, I really appreciate it, you know? All right, unless there's questions. Here's some communication tips for you if you are talking to a person who's hard of hearing. Make sure they know you're talking to them first. Sometimes we're talking over cubicle walls, or there's a couple of groups talking, having conversations, and you know, honestly for me, I don't listen to side conversations or pay attention to people if they're not directly involving me. It's too much work for me to eavesdrop. So if you are talking to a group and all of a sudden you are asking me what my opinion is, don't say blah, 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 blah. Rose, what do you think? Say Rose first. Make sure I look and then say it. Simple stuff. Teachers can do it. You all can do it with your coworkers and your family members. Just make sure they even know you're talking to them first. Make sure they see your face. And like if it's a group, like it's a big dinner or something like that, and you know somebody's hard of hearing, and there's a big conversation going on, it's really hard to follow what's going on at the other end of the table if it's like a group discussion or if it's in noise. So you can turn to a hard of hearing person and say, now they're talking about the Dallas football game yesterday. That makes it easier for the hard of hearing person to try to figure out what the topic is, so maybe we can catch a little bit more of the words, or maybe it'll help us with our lip reading, follow along a little bit better. Maybe they want to say something about the Dallas football game. But when rapid conversations happening in groups or in noise, we just start to withdraw because we know we're not being able to follow. So it really helps. Just, or somebody comes up to you, you're all talking at break time in the break room at the water cooler or whatever, and the hard of hearing employee comes in the room, just turn to them and say, we're talking about yesterday's staff meeting. That's all you have to do. It helps us a lot. Reduce background noise whenever you can, even those little things that you might not even think about, like the radio on in your office. If you can use gestures to help point to anything, speak clearly and separate your words, it's great. It helps me so much when people make that extra effort. And then you will not have to repeat it twice. I want hard of hearing people to try to incorporate some of this. We have that other handout we're going to send later.
Yes.
Dr. Triken's handout about a lot of communication tips in it. In addition to what we talked about today, we want hard of hearing people to really think about doing something different than just bluffing or saying, huh? You know what? Well, you know, when you say huh and what, that means the other person has to say the whole thing all over again. Well, maybe you heard bits and pieces of it. I think you said you're going to HEB now, but what did you ask me after that? So if you can tell the person what you heard, at least they don't have to say the whole thing all over again. That really turns people off, and they're not going to be wanting to. They'll just say, forget it. And when people say, forget it, never mind, it's not important to me, it's really hurtful to us. I mean, it kind of minimizes us, like we're not important, okay? Well, if it was anything worth saying, it's important to me. Oh, you're just talking about brushing your teeth. Okay, but just tell me what it was instead of saying it's not important. But if I can say, I think you're all talking about toothpaste, you know, and let them know what I've heard, then they don't have to say the whole thing over again. Okay, so let's try not to bluff. It only hurts us, it makes us look bad when we're bluffing, actually. We're standing there smiling, not knowing if people are talking about that their mother just passed away. I mean, literally, this has happened to my friends, you know, where we're just all, you know, smiling away, and some very sad news is being delivered. Why are you standing there smiling? It makes us look bad. So speak up for yourself. I'm not sure what you're talking about anymore. I got lost because you were talking about the football game, but now it seems like the topic's changed. Speak up for yourself. Something besides what and haunt. Tell them this is what's happening, or maybe it's just too noisy in here. So, you know, if you want to talk to me, let's go somewhere else. Can we please change venues? You know, take some charge of your life. It's okay to be hard of hearing. It's not so stigmatized that we can't speak up for ourselves. We cannot speak up for ourselves. I try not to say can't because of examples we've already talked about. Are there any questions?
No questions. We
okay.
have a comment, but I'm going to save it. But we have just under 15 minutes, and you
Sure.
still have about 18 slides. So
sure.
I just want to make sure you knew where we were.
Yes, and a lot of these slides I've kind of already alluded to. I wanted to show a couple things about for groups. When I had a group meeting with a bunch of people who are hard of hearing, we made signs for everybody. So, you know, sometimes if you have a group and you have a presenter and the people in the audience are hard of hearing and they're raising their hand, well, you don't know if they're raising their hand to ask the presenter a question or to say, I'm not hearing you, you know, some kind of communication feedback. And you don't want to, I mean, as a person who's hard of hearing, of course, you're not going to be wanting to interrupt all the time. And so we made these reminders. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I made these that people, everyone that was hard of hearing in the group got one.
I think it's funny because the camera's reading it backwards, but you can see
Oh.
It says, please use the mic.
Camera's reading it backwards.
It shows
like
it in reverse, like a mirror, sorry.
So you can make just cheap little papers. I've done it for my other group to say, please slow down. And then on the back, we put thank you. Okay, give them feedback, appreciate it. You picked up the mic again, because presenters have a lot on their mind, right? When you're up there, you have a lot of content, you're running behind on your agenda or whatever. And so it's nice to give them positive or negative feedback so that they can change what they're doing. I also had a little button that one of our contractors made this, and it says, I read lips. So it was just something that she wore when she went out, like in public to a presentation, so that people remembered, like maybe she taught all this stuff and then people forget 30 seconds later that she's hard of hearing. So one of my coworkers wore this on a job they had at the IRS too, because she got frustrated. She kept telling people, I'm deaf. Even though I talk, I'm deaf, you know, so a visual reminder that I need to see your lips, and just try to keep it light too. So asking others for help. Yes, I've pretty much covered most of this. Make sure if we are hard of hearing that we're not just saying, you need to use the mic, you need to remember I've asked you a million times to look at me. But we need to be polite. Remember, because I have a hearing loss, you know, and I'm really interested in what you're saying. It's not your fault you're a Yankee and you talk quickly, but I need you to slow down. So give them very specific things. Say you're hard of hearing, and because you're hard of hearing, can we please try it this way? And then thank them and give them feedback how they're doing. And okay, we're going to talk a little bit about some accommodations. So this is a big myth that if a worker has a hearing loss, he knows what kind of phone he needs, or he knows what cart is, and he knows how to request accommodation. Most people that have hearing loss don't have any exposure to advocating for themselves or knowing what kind of devices or services are out there, unfortunately. So it is a big myth. Yeah. So this is remember I told you every time I go and make a presentation, I use my own portable speakers, and it's just on wheels, and it's just a sound system on wheels. It's only like 1 foot by 2 feet on wheels. And then I have 2 mics with it. And I have a pass around and a lavalier, and it just gives amplification to the whole room. So it's great for trainings and meetings when you're meeting in different facilities and stuff like that, when you just need an amplification boost.
Rose, does this system can you have more than one microphone so that you can, like say you're in a meeting with like our committee meeting, I've been talking about purchasing something like this, so that there was a mic on the table for 4 or 5, so that people could share and near each other. Does this have that capability?
This is kind of a general one, but I have a few vendor contacts that kind of like customize, put together a kit. If you say, I need 3 mics for the room and one of them needs to be on a table, they can like daisy chain the mics to add on.
Perfect. That's good to know.
Yeah.
We'll send that information afterwards too. Maybe a list of,
I really just try to use vendors in Texas, so my list is really
that's
short.
fine. That's fine.
It's a short list, but okay. So I just like to, again, encourage people to always use mics because we don't want to be yelling. Remember, yelling distorts the signal, it distorts our speech, and also yelling doesn't pick up all of those little high frequencies and shh.
Right.
But when you have a mic up next to your mouth, you will pick that up. Okay, these are just simple little, very personally affordable, $150. So a person that maybe has a broken hearing aid or cannot afford a hearing aid right now, I always recommend to families something like this. There's several brands, and they're just, if you don't have a hearing aid, you just either wear earbuds or a headphone, and you can turn up the volume for, you know, $150, $160. So I recommend those a lot of times for maybe senior citizens who don't have any financial resources for hearing aid, or going to a training and you don't have a hearing aid yet and you just need a boost. You know, maybe you can hear fine one-on-one, but you need some more amplification. So these are really, or keep in your office for when you have a client that comes in. You don't want to be yelling at them because you're talking confidential information. Just, I recommend to the vocational rehabilitation counselors, they keep these in their office because they get a lot of hard hearing clients.
Sandra asked, have you heard of an AVA system for use on laptops?
AVA?
I don't know what, Sandra, would you let me know what AVA is, and we'll come back to your question.
To use on laptops for giving webinars?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm going to ask them to clarify.
Some of these kinds of devices can be plugged into a laptop just to amplify for you listening to a webinar, if that's what you mean. We'll get some more info from her.
Okay.
And this is just a little couple $100 that I've recommended to museums and tour places, because those poor people, those tour guides going through the caves in Georgetown are yelling. They're yelling all day long at groups of people as they're walking along somewhere. So it's just something you wear. It gives a little bit of amplification for those are really a difficult setting for people that are hard of hearing too, because unless I'm standing right next to the tour guide, I don't hear anything the tour guide's saying.
So how might these benefit somebody in the workplace?
This one I've recommended to trainers, and they can just take it with them. It's just, you know, put on this amplifier and it gives like 25, 30 dB boost, and so everybody in the room can hear you better and you don't have to yell.
Gotcha.
So you can get it for a trainer.
Very good.
Yeah. And this, you guys, is everyone seeing the captioning tonight? Okay, today. All right, so this is computer-assisted real-time translation, CART, which we are using remotely today. So the court reporter who's certified in real time is sitting somewhere else, I don't know where, in her home probably, in his home probably.
It's a her today.
I want to thank her. She's really keeping up. And
She's doing a good job.
Tough job, because I am not.
We have Caitlin with us today.
Thank you, Caitlin, for doing remote CART for us. So Randy's office hires a court provider that is CART certified, and you can find CART certified providers on the Texas Court Reporter Association website that I listed here. We are sharing PowerPoints, right? Okay, they'll get this later. Can be provided on site or remotely. So remotely, the CART provider is listening to us, listening in through the webinar, through our computer, and they just send us a website to click a link, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're just,
right. And we will also share the transcript, just FYI. We send the transcript along with the PowerPoint just to everybody that attends. We automatically do that, so that you've got a copy. If you might look at a slide and think, what did we address on that? Or I remember her talking about something, but I can't remember exactly what she said. You can use the search key in that, or the find key, and put in a word maybe from that slide, and you'll find that information. Now, it is not perfectly paragraphed. It's a whole bunch of lines. It's not transcribed. It's not formatted. So it's just an unedited transcript. And I would say it's typically 98 to 99% accurate. Very few errors we ever get with this company that we use. So it's handy to have.
Yes,
Next
and
slide.
we love our cart providers.
Yes, we do.
Next slide. Okay, just a little blip about people with hearing aids. If you are ordering hearing aids or not yet have them, I always recommend that people ask for a programmable T-coil or telecoil that you can like push a button or change the program so that you can be on your T-coil setting. And what this does is it cuts out background noise and allows you to hear directly either into a phone or into a listening device that you're using. And I mean, I use mine all the time. And so if you're sitting in a noisy cubicle, all you have to do is push a button, and when you're on your T-coil setting, you don't hear your background noise anymore. You only hear what's coming through the phone or other devices. I have another slide about devices. We mentioned FM systems a couple times today. We said if you're going to a training or a board meeting or somewhere and you're not sure whether you're going to be able to understand the presenter because it's first time with that presenter and you're wearing hearing aids already, but are they going to be enough, that you can request that they provide, that the entity provide an FM listening system. And this is for distance. This will go, probably most of these are 100 feet. So the listener that's hard of hearing wears one part of the device, the receiver, either with headsets, ear tips, or on the bottom right, it look like a lanyard. That's actually a neck loop that's picking up the signal from the last slide where we showed you the telecoil. Can you go back?
I can.
That telecoil inside a hearing aid, when you set your hearing aid onto T, okay, then we are able to just use a lanyard, because if you have hearing aids, you know it's really difficult to wear headphones on top of hearing aids. You get a lot of squealing and feedback. It's hard to get it to sit just right. So using that lanyard and your telecoil are awesome. You know what's really cool about an FM system? When you're sitting in the middle row, you don't even have to sit in the front, and you turn on your FM system and the presenter has a mic, it sounds like the presenter is standing right next to you talking in your ear. So it cuts out all of the distance problems we have and all the background problems we have. We only hear what's going through that mic.
And I tell you what, I've used it for taking notes in a meeting
Oh.
where the speaker was far away. It was a long time ago, but a commission meeting, and it was really hard to hear, and we were in a large room, so I put on a neck loop so that I could, or that exact one on the bottom right, an FM system, so I could hear better with just the earbuds, and I could hear better, so I could take good notes.
Yeah, and no straining, no effort. You can just listen easily, smooth. Okay, resources, because we are out of time. If you need to borrow devices, like if you're a nonprofit group or you're an individual and you want to try something, you could ask to borrow an FM system or a personal amplifier or some of the other things we mentioned at this resource. It's short-term loan. They will mail it to people. You have to know what you're asking for. You have to know FM or personal amplifier.
And they can also demonstrate equipment for you.
Yes, they just cannot do, well, they can do presentations. They cannot do like an individual assessments. That's not part of their. On the next page, we have some contractors in some regions who can do individual assessments, either in the workplace or with individuals in other settings, to try different devices to see what will work for a person that's hard of hearing. We only have them in some regions, so when you go to this link and you don't see your region included, if you're in Texas, you can email Melissa Bell, my coworker, and say, I'm from this city, I don't see a technology specialist in my area, and Melissa will shoot out an email and look and search to try to connect you with a technology specialist in another region.
And let me go back. I opened up a different presentation you sent me earlier, so there's a few more slides in there that we didn't talk about. So I want to just admit up front that We didn't skip those slides. And they're just pictures of other kinds of technology, like a cell phone amplifier, a bed shaker. And she knew we would run out of time, and I've actually opened the wrong one. But if you've got questions about these other pictures, please email Rose about that. So I apologize. That's my fault.
And I tried to disclaimer at the beginning, say we're not going to talk a lot about technology. I just wanted to address technology for like meetings, and to say that there's lots of other stuff out there, and we will have another webinar on assistive technology later in the fall, I hope, but also we'll try to connect people with our technologies.
And we will be happy to make sure you have that information about that webinar if you will.
Oh, sure,
get
we'll
in
share
touch
it.
with me. And we may ask that you do it again for us. That way we hit the people that are on our listservs as well as you hit yours, just in case there's,
okay.
Maybe we'll do it for us as well later, but we'll send you, because her office is doing this on their system, but we'll make sure that you get that information. Quickly, I want to just say we have a couple of comments here. Other than reaching out to TWC for assistance in purchasing hearing aids, if you do not have an employment goal or cannot go back to work, or you're not in the workplace, then you may qualify for getting assistance at the Centers for Independent Living in Texas to purchase hearing aids and other kinds of hearing assisted devices. So I will make sure you have the Independent Living Center's contact information in my follow-up email. In addition, one person also said, if what I have learned is true, 1 out of every 4 people have some level of hearing impairment. When we advocate for ourselves in a meeting or other settings, we are helping others in the room. Is it that?
I love that.
Is it 1 out of every 4? I thought it was a little more than that.
It's around 16%. Yeah. So yes, and I always agree with that. A lot of people struggle in noise. A lot of people struggle in meeting. When you are advocating for yourself, you are gently advocating for everyone else that's not speaking up and maybe too ashamed of their hearing loss. Still.
We have another question. What are your thoughts about the new hearing aids that coordinate with the iPhone and Androids? They are expensive, but are they worth it?
I'm sorry. I cannot really address hearing aid issues because I'm not an audiologist. And
gotcha.
I mean,
can the technology specialist help with those kinds of recommendations?
I really think that that's a discussion between you and your audiologist, because I always go to my audiologist and say, here's my budget, here's what I want my hearing aid to do, here's my frustrations, and I only have this much money. And this is the kind of phone I have, and so I just suggest they have that conversation with their audiologist.
Okay. And the AVA question about that is software to use on personal cell phones, which shows text conversations. However, the pro version is to be purchased to use in meetings, so captions are displayed of speaking, people speaking. I have not heard or seen this.
I've heard of Ava before, but I forgot what the question was about Ava.
About connecting it to your laptop and using something. So maybe we can research that and follow up in an email.
Yeah, I need to know the question better too.
Okay.
But the technology specialists probably know about it.
They probably do.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. The last slide was just my contact, so Randy will have that.
Will do.
Thank you, cart provider.
And thank you, cart provider, Texas Closed Captioning. Thank you all for attending. Rose, thank you for joining us today. And I hope you have a great afternoon. We will go ahead and close out the session. Bye-bye.